You think soul food in the 1960s was just fried chicken and collard greens? Think again. Black kitchens across America served up some of the most unusual, resourceful, and jaw-dropping dishes you've never heard of. Let's dig into 30 strangest 1960s soul food dishes you'll never see again. Possum and sweet potatoes was a dish that made city folks cringe, but country families celebrated as Sunday dinner royalty throughout the rural South during the 1960s. The possum was caught in late autumn when it had been fattening on persimmons and acorns, giving its meat an unexpectedly sweet flavor. After careful cleaning and an overnight soak in salted water, the possum was stuffed with sweet potatoes, seasoned with sage and wild onions, before being slow roasted in a Dutch oven buried in coals. The fat rendered down and basted both the meat and the potatoes into something tender and richly flavored. Families gathered around platters piled high with this unusual combination, the orange potatoes glistening alongside the golden meat. It represented resourcefulness and the ability to turn what the land provided into genuine celebration. Raccoon stew with dumplings was a dish that proved black cooks could transform any ingredient into something worth savoring during the lean years of the 1960s. The raccoon was hunted, cleaned, and soaked for days to remove any gamey taste before being cut into chunks and browned in rendered fat. Onions, carrots, and potatoes were added to the pot along with bay leaves and thyme. Then everything simmered for hours until the meat fell apart at the touch of a fork. Dumplings made from flour, salt, and a bit of lard were dropped into the bubbling stew, puffing up as they absorbed the rich broth. The finished dish was ladled into deep bowls, each spoonful carrying tender meat, soft vegetables, and pillowy dumplings. This was the kind of meal that fed entire families from a single pot, turning an unusual protein into pure comfort. Pig ear sandwiches were a Saturday afternoon staple at juke joints and fish fry stands across the South during the 1960s, offering cheap protein with bold flavor that satisfied hungry workers. The ears were cleaned meticulously, then simmered until tender before being sliced thin and fried in hot grease until the edges turned crispy and golden. The texture was unlike anything else, chewy and crunchy at once with a rich porky taste that lingered on the tongue. Piled onto soft white bread with hot sauce, pickles, and sometimes a smear of mustard, these sandwiches cost pennies but delivered satisfaction worth far more. Men would line up at roadside stands, passing coins through windows and receiving warm paper-wrapped bundles in return. The sandwich represented the genius of using what others discarded and creating something people craved. Blood pudding with grits was a breakfast dish that appeared on rural black tables during hog killing season throughout the 1960s, using every part of the animal with reverence. Fresh pig blood was collected and mixed with cooked rice, onions, and spices before being stuffed into casings and simmered until firm. The pudding was then sliced thick and fried until the outside crisped while the inside stayed soft and richly seasoned. Served alongside creamy grits swimming in butter, the combination provided enough sustenance to fuel a full day of labor. The taste was earthy and deeply savory, with the iron-rich pudding balanced by the mild corn flavor of the grits. Though it made outsiders squeamish, families who grew up eating it remembered the dish with fondness. It represented the complete use of the hog and the wisdom of wasting nothing. Hog maw, stuffed with sausage, was a holiday centerpiece in many black households during the 1960s, transforming the pig's stomach into something spectacular. The maw was cleaned thoroughly inside and out, then stuffed with a mixture of homemade sausage, potatoes, onions, and cabbage seasoned with sage and black pepper. Sewn shut with kitchen twine, It was roasted slowly for hours until the outer skin turned golden and crispy, while the stuffing inside became tender and flavorful. Sliced thick at the table, each piece revealed layers of meat and vegetables bound together by the maw's natural gelatin. Families served it for Christmas, New Year's, or whenever company was expected. The dish demonstrated mastery over ingredients that others might reject, proving that skill could elevate anything into a feast. Turtle soup with sherry was a dish that bridged poverty cooking and fine dining in Black communities along southern rivers during the 1960s. Snapping turtles were caught by brave souls willing to risk their fingers, then cleaned and the meat removed from the shell to reveal flesh that tasted like a cross between chicken and fish. The meat was simmered for hours with onions, celery, hard-boiled eggs, and spices until it fell apart into the rich broth. A splash of sherry added just before serving gave the soup an unexpected elegance that surprised anyone who tasted it. Served at church suppers and family gatherings, turtle soup proved that resourceful cooking could produce something genuinely refined. The dish connected families to rivers and waterways that provided free protein for those who knew how to harvest it. Fried frog legs were a delicacy that children caught and families celebrated in rural Black communities near swamps and ponds throughout the 1960s South. Boys would spend summer evenings hunting frogs with flashlights and gigs, returning home with their catch to mothers who knew exactly what to do. The legs were cleaned, soaked in buttermilk to tenderize the meat, then dredged in seasoned cornmeal and fried in hot lard until golden and crispy. The meat was white and tender, tasting remarkably like chicken, but with a delicate sweetness that set it apart. Families ate them with their fingers, pulling the tender meat from tiny bones and fighting over the last pieces. The dish represented summer abundance and the joy of eating what you caught yourself. It taught children that dinner could come from the land if you were willing to work. Pickled pig lips were sold in gallon jars at corner stores and fish markets throughout Black neighborhoods during the 1960s, offering a tangy snack that cost almost nothing. The lips were boiled until tender, then packed into jars filled with vinegar brine, seasoned with hot peppers, garlic, and pickling spices. They sat for weeks, absorbing the sharp flavors until they became something entirely new. The texture was chewy and slightly gelatinous, with a pickled tang that made your mouth pucker and crave more. Men would buy them by the piece, eating them straight from the jar while standing at the counter talking with the shop owner. Children begged for pennies to buy their own, learning young that good eating didn't require fancy ingredients. Pickled pig lips proved that preservation could transform the humblest parts into treats. Chicken feet stew was a dish born from buying what the butcher practically gave away and turning it into something deeply nourishing. During the 1960s, Black families would simmer clean chicken feet for hours with onions, garlic, tomatoes, and vegetables until the collagen released into the broth. The feet became tender and gelatinous, with meat that slid off the tiny bones with surprising ease. The broth turned silky and rich, providing natural body without the need for flour or cream. Served over rice with hot sauce on a side, this stew warmed bodies and stretched budgets in ways that conventional cuts never could. Grandmothers swore by its healing properties, feeding it to sick children and recovering mothers. The dish represented kitchen wisdom passed through generations who understood that flavor hid in unexpected places. Pigtail perloo was a rice dish that stretched a handful of pigtails into a feast capable of feeding an entire family during the 1960s South Carolina Low Country. The tails were simmered for hours until the meat fell away from the bones and the fat rendered into the cooking liquid, creating a rich base for the rice. Tomatoes, onions, and bell peppers were added along with long grain rice that absorbed every drop of flavor as it cooked. The finished dish was one-pot perfection, the rice stained red from tomatoes and glistening with pork fat. Families gathered around the table with large spoons, scooping portions onto plates and savoring the tender meat. Pigtail perloo represented the Gula tradition of making celebration food from what others threw away. It proved that humble ingredients could become something worth remembering. Fried gizzards with hot sauce were sold at fish shacks, gas stations, and corner stores across black neighborhoods during the 1960s, offering cheap protein with serious crunch. The gizzards were cleaned and boiled until tender, then dredged in seasoned flour and dropped into bubbling hot oil until they turned deep golden brown. The texture was unlike any other fried food, chewy on the inside with a shatteringly crisp coating that held up to generous splashes of hot sauce. Workers bought them by the bag during lunch breaks, eating them with their fingers while standing in parking lots. Children pooled their coins to share portions after school. The gizzards represented the genius of soul food, taking what others discarded and creating something people lined up to buy. Each bite delivered satisfaction that fancy restaurants couldn't match. Vinegar pie was a Depression-era invention that persisted on black tables throughout the 1960s when lemons were too expensive to buy. The filling combined sugar, flour, butter, eggs, and white vinegar into a custard that tasted remarkably like lemon pie to anyone who didn't know the secret, baked in a flaky crust until the top turned golden and the filling set. This pie proved that necessity truly was the mother of invention. Families served it at Sunday dinners and church suppers, often without revealing what made it so tangy. Children would beg for second slices, never suspecting that the bright flavor came from the same vinegar their mothers used for cleaning. The pie represented the quiet genius of black cooks who refused to let poverty steal sweetness from their tables. Creativity could transform pantry staples into dessert. Pigskin cracklins were the crunchy reward that came from rendering lard during hog killing season, a tradition that continued in rural black communities throughout the 1960s. As the fat melted away from the skin in large cast iron pots, the remaining pieces turned crispy and puffed, becoming golden nuggets of satisfaction. Salted generously while still hot, they shattered between teeth with an audible crunch. Families ate them warm by the handful, fighting over the crispiest pieces while the lard was still being processed. Some saved portions for later, though they rarely lasted past supper time. Cracklins appeared at barbecues, fish fries, and holiday gatherings where they disappeared faster than any other snack. They represented the complete use of the hog and the reward for the hard work of butchering. Nothing was wasted. Sardine sandwiches were a working man's lunch throughout black communities in the 1960s, offering complete protein from a can that cost almost nothing. The sardines were mashed with mustard, hot sauce, and sometimes chopped onions, then spread between slices of white bread or stuffed into crackers. The flavor was bold and briny, the fish oil providing richness that made the simple sandwich satisfying. Men carried these to factory jobs and construction sites, eating them cold during short lunch breaks. Children learned to make them for themselves when parents worked late. The sandwiches represented self-sufficiency and the ability to feed yourself without depending on anyone else. They required no cooking, no refrigeration, and no special skills. Sardine sandwiches proved that survival didn't need to be complicated, just practical. Pig feet souse was a cold jelly dish that appeared at holiday tables and special occasions throughout Black communities in the 1960s South. The feet were simmered for hours with vinegar, onions, bay leaves, and hot peppers until the meat fell from the bones and the natural gelatin released into the liquid. Poured into pans and refrigerated overnight, the mixture set into a tangy, spiced aspic studded with tender meat. Sliced thick and served cold with crackers or bread, the souse offered textures and flavors unlike anything else on the table. The vinegar gave it brightness, while the gelatin created a silky mouthfeel that melted on the tongue. Older relatives claimed it was good for the joints and the complexion, though the real appeal was simply how delicious it tasted. Pig feet souse represented the art of preservation. Poke salad was a dish gathered from roadsides and forest edges using a wild plant that required careful preparation to avoid its natural toxins. During the 1960s, Black families in rural areas knew exactly when to pick the young pokeweed leaves in early spring before they became dangerous. The leaves were boiled in multiple changes of water to remove the poison, then sautéed with bacon grease, onions, and sometimes scrambled eggs. The finished dish had an earthy, slightly bitter flavor that old-timers craved each spring. Gathering poke was a family activity, with elders teaching children which plants to pick and how to prepare them safely. The tradition connected families to the land and to generations of knowledge passed down through observation. Poke salad represented survival skills that couldn't be learned from books. Kidney stew was a dish that appeared on Black tables when organ meats were the only affordable option at the butcher counter during the 1960s. The kidneys were soaked in salted water to remove strong flavors, then sliced and browned in bacon fat before being simmered with onions, potatoes, and gravy until tender. The texture was firm but yielding, the flavor rich and slightly mineral with depth that regular meat couldn't match. Served over rice or with biscuits for soaking up the gravy, kidney stew provided iron and protein at a fraction of the cost of steaks or roasts. Families who grew up eating it remembered the dish with genuine affection. It represented the nutritional wisdom of ancestors who understood that organ meats provided essential nutrients. Kidney stew proved that cheap didn't mean inferior. Fried rabbit was a dish that connected Black families to the land during the 1960s when hunting provided meat that grocery stores couldn't match in freshness or price. The rabbit was soaked in salted water overnight, then cut into pieces and dredged in seasoned flour before being fried in cast iron until golden brown. The meat was lean and tender, tasting similar to chicken, but with a slightly gamey sweetness that set it apart. Families served fried rabbit at Sunday dinners and special occasions, the platter holding pride of place at the center of the table. Children who helped with the hunt felt ownership of the meal, having contributed to putting food on the table. The dish represented self-reliance and the ability to provide for your family through skill and effort. Fried rabbit proved that the best meals came from your own hands. Chitlins were served at juke joints during cold months when hog killing season brought fresh supplies to kitchens across the South. These pig intestines required hours of cleaning, soaking, and simmering before they became tender enough to eat. The smell was unmistakable and polarizing, announcing their presence throughout the building. But for those who loved them, chitlins delivered a rich, earthy flavor that connected to African American foodways stretching back generations. Juke joints served them with hot sauce, vinegar, and crackers, the acidic bite cutting through the richness. They were holiday food and celebration food, appearing on New Year's Eve when tradition demanded, eating chitlins at a juke joint meant belonging to a community that understood their significance beyond mere taste. Neckbones and rice-filled plates at juke joints where the music played late and budgets ran thin. These bony cuts from pigs were simmered for hours in seasoned water until the meat fell away and the collagen melted into silky gravy, served over mounds of white rice that soaked up every drop of rich porky broth. This dish stretched to feed crowds on budgets that left nothing for waste. The bones held pockets of succulent meat that required gnawing and sucking to fully enjoy. Juke joint cooks started these pots early, letting them bubble while preparing for evening crowds. Neck bones cost almost nothing at the butcher because most customers didn't want them. But black cooks knew time and patience could transform cheap ingredients into something extraordinary. Fried corn appeared in cast iron skillets at reunions, its kernels glistening with butter and slightly caramelized from the heat. Women cut fresh corn from the cob, scraping the milk from each ear to add creaminess. The kernels were fried slowly in bacon drippings with onions until golden and slightly crisp at the edges. Salt, pepper, and sometimes a pinch of sugar brought out the corn's natural sweetness. The dish was simple but transformative, raw corn becoming rich and satisfying through patient cooking. Children who wouldn't eat corn any other way devoured fried corn by the spoonful. It stretched summer's abundance into celebration, food costing almost nothing. Fried corn represented the alchemy of Southern cooking, turning garden vegetables into something extraordinary. Pickled eggs sat in jars beside the pickled pig's feet, offering protein for customers who wanted something quick between drinks. Hard-boiled eggs were submerged in spiced vinegar brine, sometimes with beet juice that turned them pink and added sweetness. The pickling firmed the whites and infused the eggs with tangy, slightly sour flavor that cut through the heaviness of fried foods. Juke joints kept jars on counters where customers could point and order, the eggs fished out with tongs and served on small plates. They cost almost nothing and lasted for weeks, making them perfect for establishments watching every penny. Pickled eggs were bar food from another era, simple and strange, but satisfying for those who appreciated their vinegary bite and convenience. Fried pies were the handheld treats that appeared wrapped in paper towels at reunion dessert tables. Women rolled out biscuit dough into circles, filled them with sweetened fruit, then folded and crimped the edges before frying until golden. Apple and peach were the most common fillings, made from fresh fruit or preserves put up earlier in the season. The dough puffed and crisped in hot oil while the filling bubbled inside, creating pockets of fruity sweetness. Children grabbed them still warm, biting through crispy crust to reach the soft fruit within. Fried pies traveled well and could be eaten without plates or forks. They cost almost nothing to make when fruit was abundant and could be prepared in large batches. Fried pies represented the portable nature of reunion eating, where people move between conversations and activities. Fried okra appeared as the vegetable side that converted even okra skeptics at juke joints throughout the South. The pods were sliced into rounds, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, and fried until the exterior turned golden and crunchy while the interior stayed tender. Frying eliminated the sliminess that made some people avoid okra, replacing it with satisfying crunch. Served hot in paper-lined baskets, fried okra was finger food that customers popped like popcorn between bites of other dishes. The cornmeal coating crisped perfectly in hot oil, each piece delivering earthy okra flavor wrapped in golden shell. Juke joints made batches throughout the night, keeping the supply fresh for steady demand. Fried okra was cheap to produce when okra was in season, making it a profitable side that customers ordered repeatedly without complaint. Oxtail stew appeared on juke joint menus as the kind of slow-cooked luxury that turned tough cuts into velvet. The bony tail sections were browned in batches, then braised for hours with onions, carrots, and tomatoes until the meat fell from the bone and the collagen melted into silky sauce. Each piece required gnawing and sucking to extract every bit of flavor, making the eating slow and satisfying. Juke joints served oxtail over rice, the grains soaking up the rich gravy while customers worked through bones. The dish was Caribbean influenced in some establishments, seasoned with allspice and Scotch bonnet peppers that added heat and complexity. Oxtail cost less than prime cuts, but delivered richness that expensive steaks could not match. This was food for people who understood that time and technique created value. Pickled beets brought vibrant color to reunion tables, their deep magenta hue staining everything they touched while delivering sweet and tangy flavor. Women canned them by the dozen in summer when beets were cheap, creating jewel-toned jars that lasted until reunion season. The beets were boiled tender, sliced thin, and packed into jars with hot vinegar brine, sweetened with sugar and spiced with cloves. Served cold alongside heavy meat dishes, they provided refreshing contrast that cleansed the palate between bites. Children learned early to be careful around the beet table, though purple-stained fingers became badges of reunion participation. The pickling process transformed affordable root vegetables into something elegant. Pickled beets represented forward-thinking preservation, summer's bounty captured in glass to brighten gatherings. Watermelon rind pickles were a testament to the waste-nothing philosophy that defined African-American cooking. After the sweet red flesh was eaten during hot reunion afternoons, the white and green rinds were saved and transformed into sweet, tangy pickles. Women soaked the rinds overnight in salt water to firm them, then simmered them in a syrup of vinegar, sugar, cinnamon, and cloves until translucent. The process took patience but cost nothing, since the rinds were kitchen scraps given new life. These pickles provided welcome contrast to heavy reunion foods, their sweet acidity cutting through plates of meat and gravy. Children often wrinkled their noses at first, but grew to love the unexpected sweetness hiding in those pale slices. Watermelon rind pickles represented the genius of turning would-be garbage into treasured food. Sweet potato pie appeared at juke joints as a dessert that reminded everyone of home kitchens and Sunday dinners. Roasted sweet potatoes were mashed smooth with butter, sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla, then poured into flaky crusts and baked until set. The filling was denser and earthier than pumpkin pie, with a natural sweetness that needed less sugar than other desserts. Juke joints kept pies under glass domes on counters, slicing wedges for customers who needed something sweet after plates of savory food. The spices perfumed the air, mixing with cigarette smoke and barbecue. Sweet potato pie was celebration and comfort combined, the taste of holidays and homecomings. For a dime or quarter, a slice could transport someone back to their grandmother's kitchen, even inside a roadhouse. Muskrat dinner was a regional specialty in the Chesapeake Bay area, where black watermen trapped these aquatic rodents for both fur and food during the 1960s. The meat was dark and rich, tasting more like duck than any land animal, with a slight sweetness from the muskrat's diet of marsh plants. Cleaned and soaked overnight to remove any strong flavors, the muskrat was then roasted or stewed with onions and potatoes until tender. Churches and community organizations held muskrat dinners as fundraising events, serving the unusual meat to crowds who considered it a delicacy. The tradition connected families to the waterways that provided their livelihood and to generations of knowledge about harvesting from the marsh. Muskrat dinner represented regional food culture at its most distinctive, a taste you could only find in certain places.
Cowpeas and rice pilaf offered a taste of Carolina heritage that African-American families carried forward with pride during the 1970s. Dried cowpeas soaked overnight were simmered gently with smoked turkey wings or a ham hock until tender, releasing a broth rich with earthy flavor. Long-grain rice was added to the pot, soaking up the seasoned liquid and transforming the dish into a complete meal. Onions, celery, and a hint of thyme gave the pilaf a savory depth, while a dash of hot pepper added subtle heat. Served with cornbread or fried green tomatoes, it filled bellies and satisfied the craving for something both nourishing and steeped in tradition. This was a dinner that honored the resilience of generations who turned humble ingredients into lasting comfort. It carried the memory of fields and family gardens while fitting neatly into busy urban kitchens. Cowpeas and rice pilaf reminded everyone that simple foods, cooked with patience and love, could rival any fancy restaurant meal when shared around a welcoming table. Sorghum syrup bread was a wartime and Depression-era answer to expensive refined sugar. Sorghum, a tall grass grown widely in the South, was boiled down into a thick, dark syrup that tasted earthy and sweet. Families would use it in place of sugar, mixing it into simple bread doughs to stretch rations and still enjoy something satisfying. Sorghum syrup bread was hearty, with a flavor that carried a touch of bitterness, but warmed the spirit. Children often slathered slices with butter or drippings, while adults enjoyed it with strong coffee. It was a farm food at its core, tied directly to the fields where sorghum stalks grew. Sorghum bread meant that no one had to give up sweetness completely even when sugar prices were too high or stores ran out. This loaf was practical, easy to make at home, and deeply tied to southern soil. After times of scarcity passed, sorghum faded, but the memory of that dark bread stayed. Hog brains and eggs was once a breakfast staple in rural communities, valued for being inexpensive, high in protein, and deeply flavorful. The brains were cleaned, seasoned, and sautéed until tender, then folded into scrambled eggs for a creamy texture and rich taste, unlike anything else. This dish was often cooked in a cast-iron skillet, where the residual heat helped meld the flavors together. Served with biscuits or grits, it was a hearty start to the day for those working long hours in the fields or factories. In many African-American households, it was both a practical and cultural dish, rooted in the tradition of using every part of the animal. Its preparation carried the knowledge of how to clean and cook ingredients that many today would pass over. Over time, changing tastes and supermarket offerings pushed hog brains out of everyday cooking, and with it went the skill to prepare them well. While it may seem unusual to modern diners, for those who grew up with it, hog brains and eggs were just breakfast, warm, filling, and made with care. Cornmeal-crusted okra cakes turned a beloved southern vegetable into a crispy entree that delighted both adults and children during the 1970s. Fresh okra pods were sliced thin and mixed with cornmeal, minced onions, and a touch of buttermilk to create a thick batter. Small patties were formed by hand and pan, fried in hot oil until each cake developed a crunchy golden crust with a tender green interior. The nutty flavor of the cornmeal complemented the mild tang of the okra, while a sprinkle of salt right out of the pan sealed in the warmth. Served alongside sliced tomatoes or a dollop of hot sauce, these cakes were both hearty and refreshingly light. They made clever use of garden harvests when okra plants produced more pods than anyone could stew. Families prized the recipe as a thrifty way to transform vegetables into a main dish that felt indulgent. Each bite offered a satisfying crunch and a reminder that the simplest garden gifts could create meals worth remembering decades later. Fried corn pone was a dish that required almost nothing but cornmeal, water, and lard, yet it managed to fill stomachs during times of want. It was denser than cornbread and more rustic, formed into small patties and fried in cast-iron skillets until golden. Families leaned on it for breakfast, lunch, or supper because it was inexpensive, used ingredients they almost always had, and could be made quickly. Corn was abundant across the South, and every pantry had a sack of cornmeal that could be stretched into meals again and again. Eating fried corn pone often meant there was no wheat bread to be had, but no one went hungry. It was eaten with beans, dipped in potlikker, or just on its own with a smear of molasses or syrup if available. Fried corn pone reflected the determination to create something warm and satisfying even when the cupboards were close to bare. Skillet candied yams were a feast for both the eyes and the taste buds, glistening in a thick glaze of butter, brown sugar, and spices. Sweet potatoes were peeled and sliced thick, then arranged in a cast-iron skillet where they simmered gently in the sweet, buttery syrup. Cinnamon and nutmeg added warmth, while the natural sugars from the potatoes deepened the caramelization. This was not a quick dish. The yams were left to cook slowly until every slice was tender and every surface was coated with the glossy glaze. The smell alone could draw family members into the kitchen, eager for a taste before the meal was served. On holiday tables, this side dish often sat beside savory meats, providing a sweet contrast that balanced the plate. In everyday meals, it was a treat that made even a humble dinner feel special. Supermarkets today offer canned versions, but they cannot replicate the rich, layered flavor of fresh yams caramelized in a skillet. For those who remember, the first bite of skillet candied yams was pure Southern comfort, the kind that lingered long after the plate was clean. Braised turkey wings with pan gravy brought families together around a big Sunday table when the 1970s called for dinners that were both hearty and affordable. Large turkey wings were seasoned with garlic, black pepper, and a dusting of paprika before browning in a heavy skillet to build a deep flavor base. They were then slow roasted in a covered pan with onions, celery, and homemade stock until the meat grew so tender it slid from the bone. The drippings were whisked into a silky pan gravy that soaked perfectly into a mound of steamed white rice or buttered cornbread. The rich aroma filled the house and made even a simple weeknight feel like a celebration. Home cooks appreciated how the dish stretched a few inexpensive pieces of poultry into a feast that felt as grand as a holiday meal. In many African American kitchens, this recipe became a quiet statement of resourcefulness and comfort, a way to honor tradition while feeding everyone well when money was tight, but hearts were full of welcome. Chicken neck gravy was the very definition of stretching scraps into a full meal. Poultry was expensive and few families could afford large cuts, so nothing from a chicken ever went to waste. Necks were simmered slowly to release every bit of flavor, then thickened into a gravy with flour and drippings. Poured over rice, mashed potatoes, or biscuits, it transformed the cheapest part of the bird into something filling and comforting. Families looked forward to it because it stretched one bird into several meals, ensuring nothing was thrown away. This kind of resourcefulness defined survival cooking, and for many Black families in the South, it was routine. Chicken neck gravy might not have been glamorous, but it represented pride in making the most out of very little. It also carried the feeling of home, the scent of gravy simmering on the stove, and the relief of knowing everyone at the table would leave fed. Potlikker soup was more than just a humble broth. It was the essence of the greens it came from. When collards, turnip greens, or mustard greens simmered slowly with a bit of seasoning and maybe a ham bone, the cooking liquid would take on a deep, savory flavor and a rich, earthy aroma. Nothing in the kitchen went to waste, and that potlikker was treasured for its nourishment, especially in leaner times. It was often sipped straight from a bowl or paired with cornbread, which was crumbled right into the broth to soak up every last drop. This soup carried vitamins, minerals, and memories of long afternoons spent around the table, talking as the pot bubbled on the stove. In African American kitchens, it was both medicine and comfort, believed to restore strength after illness or a hard day's work. The taste was unmistakable, salty, smoky, and green all at once, with each batch a little different depending on the greens and the cook. Today, store-bought greens rarely yield the same kind of rich cooking liquid, and many younger cooks have never tasted this kitchen staple. Yet for those who remember, potlikker was a liquid linked to home. Fried porgy with hot sauce carried the salt air of the Atlantic coast right into neighborhood kitchens and fish fries across the 1970s South and Northeast. Porgy, a small but flavorful ocean fish, was cleaned, scored, and dredged in a seasoned cornmeal mixture before sliding into hot peanut oil. The crackle of frying fish and the sharp scent of cayenne filled the air as golden fillets emerged crisp and steaming. A drizzle of homemade hot sauce or a squeeze of lemon brought just enough heat and brightness to balance the sweet, briny meat. Families served it with sliced white bread, coleslaw, or grits, letting the simple sides highlight the catch of the day. For many households, this was more than a meal. It was a reason for gathering, a chance to laugh and share stories while the fish came out of the pan in batches. Affordable and deeply satisfying, fried porgy celebrated coastal traditions and proved that fresh fish and a steady hand could create a dinner worthy of any weekend crowd. Cowpea fritters were a dish that came straight out of resilience and memory, with roots reaching back to African cooking traditions. Families would soak and mash dried cowpeas, mix them with a little onion, cornmeal, and seasoning, then fry the mixture in hot lard until crisp on the outside and soft inside. They were cheap, filling, and carried the rich protein that many households could not always get from meat. For Black families in the South, cowpeas were already a staple crop, so using them to create something hearty made perfect sense. These fritters could be eaten plain or dipped in gravy, and they were often made in batches large enough to last a day or two. They carried a deep sense of history, because this kind of cooking showed how old world techniques adapted to the realities of hard times in America. They were not only nourishment, but also a connection to ancestors who had relied on the same beans for strength. Hoe cakes were a simple, satisfying food that came together from just cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, fried crisp on a hot skillet, or even on a flat hoe blade over an open fire in earlier times. They carried a taste of history, rooted in resourcefulness and the ability to make something delicious from the bare essentials. The texture was hearty yet tender, with a slight crunch at the edges and a comforting warmth in the middle. Served plain or with a drizzle of syrup, they made for a meal that could be eaten at any time of the day. In many African American homes, hoe cakes were not just food, but a connection to family traditions passed quietly through generations. They were quick to make, filling enough to sustain a long day's work and easy to prepare over whatever heat source was available. Today, they have nearly disappeared from daily kitchens, replaced by store-bought breads and processed mixes, but they still live on in the memories of those who grew up eating them hot from the skillet. Every bite was a reminder that good food did not need to be fancy to be special. Country-style ribs with apple cider glaze turned weekend gatherings into sweet, smoky celebrations in African-American neighborhoods across the 1970s. Meaty pork ribs were marinated in apple cider, brown sugar, and a splash of vinegar, then slow roasted or charcoal grilled until the meat was fall-apart tender. Midway through cooking, the ribs were brushed with a thick cider glaze that caramelized over the heat, creating a sticky surface that clung to every finger. The scent of roasting pork and sweet apples drifted across backyards, drawing neighbors and cousins long before dinner was served. Served with potato salad, baked beans, or simple white bread, the dish balanced tang and richness perfectly. It was both a nod to Southern barbecue traditions and a chance to add a fruity twist that felt fresh for the decade. Country-style ribs with apple cider glaze embodied the joy of family cookouts, where music played late into the evening and every plate carried the flavor of smoke, sweetness, and laughter shared outdoors. Sweet potato biscuits with honey were a beloved comfort food that turned humble ingredients into something special. Sweet potatoes were plentiful in the South, cheap to grow, and full of natural sweetness. By mashing them into biscuit dough, families created soft, tender breads that did not require as much flour or fat. Fresh biscuits out of the oven were topped with a drizzle of local honey if it was available, making them feel indulgent despite their simplicity. These biscuits were often served for breakfast, but they could also accompany stews or fried fish. They filled stomachs and brought warmth to the table, offering both nutrition and comfort. Sweet potatoes symbolized resilience, and honey added a touch of hope in difficult times. Together, they created a dish that carried meaning well beyond its taste. Sweet potato biscuits with honey reflected the heart of soul food, making something beautiful and memorable from ingredients that were always within reach. Sweet potato coffee was a creative solution born out of necessity, offering a warm, comforting drink without the expense of imported coffee beans. Sweet potatoes were peeled, sliced, roasted until caramelized, then ground and brewed like coffee. The result was a drink with a mild sweetness, a toasty aroma, and a deep amber color. It lacked caffeine, but it provided a sense of comfort and normalcy, especially during lean times when real coffee was hard to come by. This was a drink that connected people to the land and their resourcefulness, turning a humble root vegetable into something that felt like a luxury. Families would gather in the morning with mugs of sweet potato coffee, often accompanied by biscuits or cornbread. While it has all but disappeared from modern kitchens, the method lives on in the memories of those who knew how to make it. It was more than a beverage. It was a reminder that flavor, warmth, and comfort could be found in unexpected places as long as you had the patience and knowledge to make it. Baked stuffed eggplant with shrimp brought a taste of the Gulf Coast to African American tables far beyond Louisiana during the 1970s. Large eggplants were halved and hollowed, their flesh sautéed with onions, celery, bell pepper, and Creole spices before being folded into a creamy mixture of shrimp and breadcrumbs. The seasoned stuffing was packed back into the shells and baked until the tops turned golden and fragrant. Each bite offered the sweetness of shrimp, the earthiness of eggplant, and a gentle heat from paprika and cayenne. Families served it with crusty French bread or a simple green salad, elevating an ordinary evening into something memorable. This dish captured the spirit of coastal kitchens where seafood and spice met in perfect harmony, and it traveled inland through family reunions and church suppers. Baked stuffed eggplant with shrimp celebrated both innovation and heritage, showing how a single vegetable could carry the bold flavors of the sea straight to a home kitchen in any corner of America.
Which strange soul food dish would you try? Drop your answer in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more forgotten flavors from Black culinary history.